You've reached Hotel Pacifico, your five-star destination for BC politicos. Press 4 for room service. Press the star key for your hosts Mike McDonald and Kate Hammer.
Welcome back, guests. Thanks for joining us again for early check-in at Hotel Pacifico. Good to see you, Geoff, and hi, Mike.
Good morning. Good morning. Last week of this.
Whew, whew,
Look who's
home
here.
stretch.
Yeah.
Oh, the cactus is back. Does he have a new message for us?
Episodes of Hotel Pacifico daily podcast. I'm exhausted.
The cactus is exhausted. I'm exhausted. The cactus is exhausted. We're going to get this done. We're going to see it right through to October
Home stretch.
19th.
Here we go.
Yeah.
We can see the E-Day light at the end of the tunnel. And it's we're definitely into a different phase of the campaign. I'll get us through. We're going to have a longer, different section today on kind of what's happened and what's coming. But stick around, guests. We will have the espresso bar again today and our check-in with where the leaders are. We've got David Eby, who is in Surrey, I think this morning, and then Richmond later. John Rastad, is it an announcement at 10 a.m. in Michael Smith Park? Yes, that would be right. That's probably the platform, we think, in
Probably.
Vancouver. Yeah.
At
Sonia,
least an early draft.
the draft of a platform or more, if we're lucky. Look forward to talking about that tomorrow. And Sonia Firstenow, she's in a virtual town hall later today with Jeremy Valloret, but I think probably in Beacon Hill physically today. All right. One thing, I want to take one kind of quick moment to just express some gratitude for our listeners. We have been climbing the charts at like BC conservatives, I guess, in the polls over the past couple weeks. And we have been really excited to see Hotel Pacifico's listenership grow, and just to thank all of you who tune in every morning and who care enough to listen to us every single day for almost a month.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're on episode 15 of 18 daily episodes during the election. And I think some of you have probably stuck with us the entire time during the writ period. So thank you for that. I can assure you I don't have any family members that have done that for every day. But for those who have listened to every episode during the election, you are now our family. You are officially part of our family. We have forsaken our blood relatives. So thank you for that. And, like, it's been a wild ride, but let's see it through all the way to the finish line here. And we'll be, as we said late last week, we'll be on Global BC on election night. And we're looking forward to that too.
I think Geoff has the nicer family. I feel like your family members listen, Geoff, every day.
One does, I think, quite a bit. Yeah, I get a lot of
one
feedback.
more than me.
Get a lot of feedback. Yeah,
That's awesome. That's awesome. All right, moving us along. We're gonna go straight this morning because there's lots to talk about, to Milking the Data, brought to you by BC Dairy. Farmers need guaranteed access to water to feed BC. I want to start here. We have some more new Polera numbers, and I'm going to ask Mike, I'm assuming now we're going to start folding in some of the post-debate feedback. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, all the numbers I'm going to explain today is post. I think we're now all post-debate. So we've tightened it up to the last 4 periods of tracking, which will include Wednesday, Thursday, the weekend, which counts as 1, and Monday. And so that's a sample of about just over 1,000 interviews, about 250 per period per day, and all of it post-debate. Now, it's still pretty close. Today I've got from Polera Strategic Insights, 42 NDP, 39 Conservative, 14 Green, and 5 other/independent. Now, since the debate, it's kind of gone in different directions. We've saw a bit of a Green spike after the debate, but then we saw an NDP surge, and then Conservatives actually did okay over the weekend, and now it's rebalancing again in favor of the NDP. And the key is not to get blown off course by one night's polling. You got to look at it in aggregate, but we do see an NDP edge overall. But Lower Mainland's still pretty competitive, and we also have to take into account that a lot of people voted. A lot of people have voted already. The first few nights of the advance poll, almost 500,000 people voted, and we haven't seen the numbers from October 13th yet, which was Sunday. So that would have been another probably a couple 100,000
Oh,
that
so the
voted.
477 doesn't include Sunday.
It's the first 3 days.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, right. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're
So
easily, yeah.
So I'm going to put in context here for advance voting. In 2013, less than 400,000 people voted in advance polls. In 2017, about 600,000 voted in advance polls. And we'll be well over 600,000 in advance polls this time. In fact, we might even push 900,000. And that is probably going to be north of 33, 35% of all the voters. Now, last election was a bit weird because, well, 671,000 voted in advance poll. There was another 500,000 maybe that voted in by mail. So last election, only I think only about 30% of the voters actually showed up on election day. Now that's not typical. But I'm wondering how many people will be left to vote on election day this time. Maybe who knows? Maybe less than 60% of all the voters will be there, will vote on election day. So, so it's this election's happening and right now, and we're still campaigning, and people are still going till the end, till Saturday. But it's in some respects maybe too late.
Yes, we've been talking about TELUS Living for a few weeks now, and I want to leave you with some of the key reasons this initiative stands out in the real estate market. 1. Advanced technological integration. TELUS Living properties come equipped with state-of-the-art connectivity and smart home solutions. 2. Community-centered design. TELUS Living homes come in a variety of layouts and unit sizes and include features that foster community engagement, including community gardens, fitness centers, and co-working spaces. 3. Affordability. Some of these homes are purpose-built rentals that middle-class families can afford within BC's household income targets. I could go on and talk about how TELUS Living units are built using sustainable materials to be energy efficient, or how they offer access to a diverse array of value-add products and services that complete the connectivity, health, and well-being experience. But I think you get the picture. By leveraging TELUS's expertise in bringing curated developments to our cities, connectivity, and innovation, TELUS Living is redefining what it means to create vibrant, sustainable, and connected communities.
Well, it kind of underlines the changes that automation may bring with the automated counting, Mike, I guess, because we were held up often waiting for advanced polls to be count where there was a tight count in a riding. Now with the machines, I guess, it'll come a lot faster. Which is a good thing because that would be a lot of people to count, at the end of the day.
Yeah, if you've got like 40% of the vote still to count, that
Now,
would be, yeah.
I heard an interesting snippet about these machines that when the advance votes go into the machine, they will be allocated to the poll where they originate from. Now, if you live in poll 37 and you're riding, in the old days, if you vote in the advance poll, you just go into the big bucket of advance polls. You don't really know where those votes came from. I'm told that your ballot will actually get allocated to your original geographic unit where you live, which that's a very nerdy point, but it means on election night, it may be harder to know when the advance polls, like what the advance poll result is. I'm not exactly sure how it's going to work yet. I need to learn a little bit more about it, but it's just going to be different this time in how we hear the results. They're going to come in faster, but they're like my question was, are all the advance polls coming in at once, and are we going to like lurch from one reality to the other like so fast, or is it going to be smoothed out? So I still don't quite understand it yet, but there are differences
maybe more
though this
humane
time
for candidates who don't, as I did on one occasion with a bunch of my friends, get into the elevator to go to the victory party thinking I had a 1,200 vote margin and get off the elevator with about 125 votes.
Yes.
My wife's joke was that if the If the holding room had been on a higher floor, I would have lost. Yes, I dropped 1,000 votes in the elevator.
That short ride.
A margin
Now,
of that.
Is there
you know,
anything? Yeah.
I was going to finish up on the numbers.
Yeah.
It bears mentioning that there are other pollsters, of course, and Ipsos, Angus Reid have been out in recent days, both showing about a 5-point NDP margin. And Main Street, good old Main Street, has been pretty consistently showing a conservative margin, although it was tightening up throughout the weekend. Still conservative lead, and some signaling by Main Street that it was going to continue to tighten. Nevertheless, there are differences among the pollsters, and part of that is the method in which they do the polling, and everyone's got to just, relax a bit, and the voters will decide, and we'll count. Those are the ones we're going to count. We're going to count the actual votes. We're not going to elect the government by the polls, but it is, tricky to sort out between people that have already voted, and if there is momentum in the final days, to what degree does it make a difference based on the remaining voters that are there. So fun to talk about it, but tricky to actually forecast.
Can we tuck into the demographics a bit too? Because I am noticing like we're seeing a bit of a lock-in with this trend of the younger voters seeming to favor the Conservatives and the older voters seeming to favor the NDP, and that's pretty consistent. Do we know like that there's not historically that's never been the case here? Like this is totally unusual, and do we have any sense of what it's about? That flipped. Yeah, Mike. Sorry.
Yeah, and I'd qualify that maybe slightly, is that the 18 to 34s bounce around a bit, and they're also the least likely to vote, although some are obviously will vote. The 35 to 54s have probably been the strongest group for the Conservatives. And these are people, mortgages, kids at home, affordability stress. And I think that's what drives a lot of that, is just the angst. And arguably 65 plus have different set of issues, maybe less concerned about affordability, more concerned about healthcare, maybe more concerned about stability and kind of predictability in government, and maybe a little less into big changes. And I'm just theorizing here, like, because federally Poilievre was coming on strong with the younger people first, and the seniors have been more resistant to him, which again is the same thing you're referring to, Kate, which is didn't always used to be that way. Like the seniors would often be the ones who are more conservative. So I think an element of it is just pace of change, level of change, type of change.
Well, the other thing is that demographic, that 35 to 55. I mean, that's workers. That's classic NDP space. Like it feels like something we're going to unpack for a while. And I was Geoff, I was thinking of it too, and wondering if it's another kind of changing media landscape piece, because the Conservatives have been so strong on channeling anger through social media, arguably to their deficit. Yeah,
my mind was going in that direction as well, because so much of the alt-right social media landscape has been very, very anti-Trudeau for sure, and pro-Poilievre. I mean, there's a more partisan tone to all of that media, individual broadcasters and YouTubers and all that kind of thing. And also a strong critique that you would have seen in labor press, to be candid, in the past, exposing whatever the wrongdoings of the day was. And historically, back in the last century, it was horrible safety conditions in meat plants. Now it can be the broken down situation you see on the downtown east side, but from a kind of an alt-right perspective. So yeah, I've been concerned for a long time that the center left is completely outclassed in that particular, in what is the media landscape right now. And it's not easy to see how that would be fixed.
Are you an electricity generation provider with experience delivering projects in Canada? Our sponsor, FortisBC, wants to hear from you. FortisBC is seeking power providers to bring new or existing projects online and increase the amount of electricity available for its customers. FortisBC has issued a formal request for expressions of interest for additional power to support the energy needs and economic growth of BC's southern interior, where the company delivers electricity. Some of our listeners might not be aware that FortisBC owns 4 hydroelectric generating plants on the Kootenay River, which allow their over 190,000 electric customers to receive approximately 1,609 gigawatt hours of energy supply each year. They meet the remainder of their customers' energy requirements by purchasing electricity. But they need more energy to meet the growing energy needs of its customers in the future. FortisBC is looking for power providers with a focus on developing innovative renewable and lower carbon energy sources, including biomass, biogas, hydroelectricity, solar, wind, and geothermal projects. FortisBC is particularly interested in new or existing projects that have a strong Indigenous equity component or are Indigenous-led. Ensuring customers have the energy they need when they need it is of critical importance for FortisBC. That's why FortisBC is looking to add up to 1,100 gigawatt hours of energy supply as soon as 2030. To learn more, visit fortisbc.com/newpower. FortisBC, energy for a better BC and a better podcast.
I'm going to move into our next segment and relate that. So let's take some time and look at what the long weekend was. And it was interesting, actually, I think. I want to talk a bit about Pierre Poilievre and the common sense ads and how they might interplay with this election. It's interesting. I'll start with you, Mike, and I'll set up that one of the things that I think is happening with the kind of the ad campaign the federal Conservatives are leading is it does seem to complement in a helpful way some of what the BC Conservatives have been doing, in the sense that I think one fairly common critique of John Rusted's leadership of the BC Conservatives is that there's a lot of the negative and a little bit less behind it. And to some extent, you could argue Pierre Poilievre is filling that for them and does have that kind of common sense, hopeful message that maybe is a nice complement to some of his kind of John Rusted's strong harnessing of the anger. What do you think of these ads, and do you think they will have an effect? These federal ads will have an effect on the provincial election?
Well, first of all, they're much more slickly produced than anything I've seen in this provincial election campaign. And right to the raising of the flag and across the Alberta prairie with the sun coming, it was all I'm sure a lot of great film production talent went into that. Now, a lot of that language that Poilievre uses has obviously been replicated in BC. He does say common sense in that ad, and he's hitting at some of those themes of change that certainly should be helpful to the BC Conservative campaign to just reinforce those themes, but coming from a different direction. So it's an interesting kind of, frankly, loophole where I guess there's nothing stopping federal parties from advertising during the provincial election period. If they couldn't, there's always a provincial election going on somewhere, so understandable, I guess, why federal parties can do that. But certainly, I would assume a welcome intervention for the Rusted campaign that they're seeing these ads.
Wouldn't that underscore the importance too to distinguish between, like I'm thinking of the NDP legal case of the BC Conservatives. Like if that's allowed to happen, then shouldn't you have to enforce that you distinguish who you are? Because they have the same name.
Yeah, well, Jagmeet Singh was out campaigning here too.
Sure. Yeah, no, I'm not putting this on the
federal
Conservatives
Liberal
at all.
MPs are endorsing the NDP.
Totally.
Until recently, we had BC Liberals, much to the chagrin of federal Liberals, of some federal Liberals. But
I think we can trust the voters to figure it out. So.
Yeah, I think the voters deserve some credit on this as well. I think they do get it. And I don't think that federal Conservatives have their own agenda, which they're running here in their own campaign. They're thinking about it from a national standpoint. What I think is fascinating is the use and appropriation of the term common sense, because it has its roots in cultural studies and even back to, a little bit of left-wing lore here. Antonio Gramsci, the founder of a whole school of thought that is now used in a lot of political analysis, a Marxist who was put in prison by Mussolini. But his idea that common sense was what everybody kind of knew was the truth, whether it was precisely the truth or not, is a very powerful concept. And I think the Conservatives have been successful in saying, well, we're the common sense people. You may not have thought about us from a political standpoint, but we actually are the ones who are representing mainstream thinking. And it's time for us to show that in legislation or whatever we do politically. trouble is that Polyev may be winning that for now, but Rustad has not seemed common sense since the debate. He's been spending most of his time talking about everything else. And, I think that part of what's happened in the last week is that Rustad's seen an interesting phenomenon. He stalled completely during the debate. I don't think they've really found their feet again and said anything sort of significant or persistent since then, except talk about Brent Chapman for the most part. But their vote really hasn't gone down very much. So we have the NDP running a very smooth campaign consistent with what it's done for many, many years and not seeing its support take off. And we see John Rustad, frankly, having a terrible time, I think, objectively. And yet his support continues to be very solid. So it's going to make for an interesting election night for sure.
Okay, let's talk about then the weekend, because it was kind of a more, I'm going to say there was more back and forth, certainly over Brent Chapman, some more tweets surfacing of his with some problematic content. We also had Selena Robinson in the Vancouver Sun sharing a chapter from her an excerpt from her upcoming book. We had, the sort of really quickly moving, press conference that EB called to talk about election interference from India and the expelled diplomats from India. It was just a loud, busy weekend. And I'm curious, I'm going to stay with you, Geoff, because I'm just curious over this kind of tumult. What do you think? What are the kind of key things that might have stuck with voters and be kind of moving people or helping those last few people who are not shaping their opinions? Is there anything in there that's sticking with them, or is this all noise at this point?
Well, I think for some voters, the Brent Chapman, and I forget which riding he's in, but
Surrey South.
He continued to produce through the efforts of Jastrow Hall. It must be said, for the most part, in this case, Jastrow Hall of CKNW kept producing new, old, but unseen Facebook posts by Brent Chapman, which were really objectionable and caused outrage in a lot of quarters where I think the conservatives had reasonable expectations of making headway, especially in the Muslim community, because Chapman had made comments about Palestinians and so forth, but he could not be removed for reasons we discussed last week. And problematically for Rustad, he's married to Carrie Lynn Findlay, a successful MP in the Conservative cabinet. And it must have been really infuriating for people like Eleanor Sturko, who not only put a torpedo into BC United when she left to cross to Rustad, but had to leave her own home seat to run against, in a different riding to see all of this chaos surrounding the Surrey situation. And so as a result, you see Rustad then promising an entirely brand new hospital outside the ones we've already had promised in Surrey, and the medical school promised by the NDP, a whole new children's hospital in Surrey. And I think the NDP firing mostly blanks all weekend, I have to say, a blizzard of press releases on both sides. So I think the voters may have come away with a sense of unease about Brent Chapman because there was widespread criticism of him and not any support. Chapman himself apologized for part of what he said. But the latest stuff, about whether or not the mass shootings at Sandy Hook were faked, are in some respects just as disturbing as the racist comments that he's already had to be accountable for. Selena Robinson, I could spend some time on, but I'll just say I don't think anything new happened there, except that Selena exacted a measure of revenge for how she felt she was treated back in the spring, and probably recreated some of the anxiety and frustration in the Jewish community that's there. But I don't know that will have a big impact overall on the election.
I'm Hamas. And this is Simon, and we live in Surrey. We started hosting on Airbnb because we thought we had the spare room, and why not share it with people? When our guests come in, first thing usually they ask is, I'm really hungry, it's been a really long flight, can you recommend a place? Usually Simon is really good with that. He knows all the good spaces. Because we got a lot of good reviews and people commented on the overall look of the space, I was like, okay, maybe I can do this for a living. It actually gave me the courage to start school in interior design. It made such an impact on us financially, and I don't know, I think we're happier because we started Airbnb for sure.
Learn more at airbnb.com/host.
Well, on the Selena piece, I was surprised that the Conservative campaign didn't jump right on top of that on Saturday morning when that excerpt came out, because I think there was probably a moment there where they could have made it into a much bigger thing, and driven media cycle just at a point where the Conservative campaign is on the ropes over the Brent Chapman stuff. Here comes an intervention from former finance minister, sharply critical of the premier.
Mm-hmm.
There it is in the Vancouver Sun, her words. They don't even have to spin it. They just have to amplify it. And they kind of did, but they didn't. And so I think they missed an opportunity there. But
Well,
on
I
the
think weren't
Brent,
they calculating a balance of issues between the Muslim community support that
I
they
don't
want to
think
have?
I just,
No.
I
I
don't,
think certainly there was something in there just because Selena Robinson made it so much about David Eby personally. I think there was something for them to
Well,
pretty
she
safely.
basically retracted her apologies too. And
Yeah.
she said what I said was true, whereas she apologized twice back during the crisis in the spring. And my own view, I have very high regard for Selena, and I think that this was very badly handled. I thought that in many respects the EB team made the least of a very difficult situation. I think that the comments she made at the time required response and a change in her cabinet position at the least. But what happened subsequently was deplorable, and so a week was lost during the legislative session. So I wasn't she there were those were the new things I thought there. But
but the point though for the Conservatives is that, irrespective of what the Muslims may think about it, is that just to get the NDP on the defensive would have been very welcome at that point of the weekend. The Brent Chapman stuff has been brutal and it's outrageous in terms of his comments, but also in terms of the impact it's had on the Conservative campaign, which is, they shot themselves in the foot. They did not do the vetting on the candidate, obviously, to the degree they should have. And I'm speculating that maybe because he's the husband of a Conservative MP, he just got passed through.
Mm.
And, a whole bunch of people should have known about the types of things he had on Facebook and other mediums, including Carrie Lynn Finley, which will have an impact on her political career. I have no doubt about it. So it's just, if you're a Conservative supporter, you ought to be pissed off about it. Now who knows? Maybe they go and win the election, and he's going to win. Like he's going to win his seat.
he's
Like
going to be in the legislature.
he's going to be in the legislature.
Yeah.
And he'll have to go on well, who knows how he's going to play it, but he's not going to be someone, he's going to have this baggage weighing him down for the rest of his political career, in my opinion. So,
Well, and John Rustad's in the Globe and Mail this morning being interviewed by Justine Hunter, and makes the comment again that recounting this tale of him being fired by Kevin Falcon, saying to Falcon, I have to speak for my constituency. And Falcon says fine and fires him. But Rustad has made it clear he expects his MLAs to do the same. And so to be in a vetting process where you read all this stuff, which really hasn't been secret to those who pay attention to that kind of stuff all this time, and say, well, actually, you can't say that, is not something that Rustad's prepared to do. Rustad is not. He's very grudging in his statements.
well, they have fired some
he's offended.
candidates. It's not like they haven't fired any candidates.
Yeah, but
They
he
fired
he-
the candidate in Prince George.
Yeah, but after a point, he said, I'm not doing that anymore.
Yeah.
And his condemnations of Chapman have been pathetic. So,
Well, I think it's, if Brent Chapman was not married to the Conservative MP, it'd probably be a different story.
Mm.
So,
well, that speaks volumes. That's a problem for Pierre Poilievre too, by the way.
yeah, I'd
Like,
say
it's not
so.
been great for him to say common sense means you think that these mass killings were faked, or that there's some genetic problem with Palestinians. And he's been deadly silent on this while he's been running his ads.
But, I have no doubt that a lot of voters are still going to hold their nose and vote Conservative, because they've got bigger concerns in their mind on affordability, crime, et cetera, that they just can't afford to get blown off course by these types of things. And for a lot of voters, it's like, that's politics. There's crazy people in politics. Tell me something new, right?
Yeah.
But obviously, when your own candidate blows you off message for a few days, it's not too desirable.
So I
But
was
then-
actually in South Surrey for my Thanksgiving dinner and having a conversation with some voters. Not everyone was aware of Brent Chapman's tweets, and they were really besieged by the issue of the balancing the budget, really. They sort of felt the NDP had spent too much and they were leaning conservative. But I think I think it's, again, that thing. I don't know how much it is punched through as much as for some voters as it is for those of us who follow it really closely.
When's the last time the Conservative campaign talked about the fiscal performance of the government?
Yeah.
When's the
Yeah.
last time they talked about the economy? Job numbers came out on Friday, and there's barely a mention of it. And when's the last time they talked about affordability?
Their
Yeah.
And
campaign
when's the last
stopped
time
on
they
the
talked about the carbon tax?
debate night.
Yeah.
Debate
Yeah.
night was a killer for them. They completely stalled that day.
So all the announcements that the Conservatives have made in the past few days have been on, they might be good announcements in and of themselves, but it's been reproductive health, education, SOGI, letter grades, exams, Children's Hospital in Surrey. It's officially called the Queensborough Surrey Children's Hospital, by the way. Do you get that, Kate? Do you get that joke? The Queensborough Surrey Hospital.
Yes.
Okay.
But
Okay.
well done, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But nothing on the economic stuff. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so let's just take a minute because I want to check in like and give it to each of you. Like just a question, like, so we're in the home stretch now. We're sort of very few people left to convince. It's a lot of a get out the vote kind of move. But what is your advice for the NDP, for the Conservatives, on what they need to do in these last few days of the campaign? I'll start with you, Geoff. Start with the BC NDP.
Well, I think they got to stay the course. They really have. There's no time now to do more than perhaps respond to the fully costed platform, which we think is going to arrive today from the Conservative. But as Mike said, there's a lot of people who voted, and we don't see a lot of fundamental shifts occurring in the outcomes. There could be some shifts. I think they've got to look at where they need to shore up support and make sure that they do that work. But we need to talk about the foreign interference, right?
Yeah.
I'm not sure how that's going to play, but on the weekend, suddenly, when I was just ready to shut down everything and stop listening to the welter of nonsense, I realized that I was missing a point here and that the RCMP had made a press conference making incredible statements about foreign interference, the departure of 6 diplomats, including the top one from India, sent home from Canada for participating in the ordering of extortion and murders and so on. It's really off the charts. But I think we have to keep in mind that that the Indian government remembers, as most people do, I think, that in 1985, a terror attack that was originated here in the Lower Mainland killed nearly 300 people, including an overwhelming 280 some Canadians in the Erie India disaster.
Mm-hmm.
And that means that Canada has an obligation to ensure that there aren't attacks launched against Indian nationals or against India from Canadian soil, even though we support the right of people to be involved in politics and the diaspora communities and so on. What India seems to have done here, according to the Canadian allegations, is just give up on Canada and decide to use organized crime to carry out its own political objectives here in Surrey. So on yesterday, I first heard about all this because I realized that David Eby was going to hold a news conference. And I think his news conference was timely and well thought through. I think he said what he could say and needed to say at that point. I think this probably will be helpful to the NDP in Surrey. I'd be interested in Mike's reaction to that. I thought that the Conservative reaction was muted in some respects and was not repeated on social media. I had to go back to the website some hours later to find
there was a news release
statement. Yeah, there was a news release, but they didn't pump it out.
But is there a big difference in the position between the Conservatives and the NDP?
Well, the Conservatives no, not really. But
part of the Conservatives, I wouldn't want to spend a lot of time talking about it. It's not going to move votes for them. It's just one of these things that comes out of the blue in election campaign, and everyone stops and looks at it, and you want to get right back on, hopefully get back onto what you want to talk about.
It is a hard one, though, because it is such a big deal. But then what it means for the politics and what you do with it for either party is, I think, a little bit confusing. I agree, though, Geoff. I think
there's 2 Mounties on the RCMP's Surrey team, Baltej Dillon and Gary Begg. There's a stronger NDP position on organized crime, in my view, and a statement that the gun control laws should be enforced, not dropped, as John Rustad has said. And I think in terms of mobilization on the ground in the community, this issue is going to be more helpful to the Democrats than it will be to the Conservatives. And that's a key battleground. So we'll see. And maybe it won't make a difference, but it's certainly a huge story, and it speaks to a lot of what's going on in BC society that never gets talked about. And that's the significant and very dangerous and violent gangs that are working right across Western Canada and are globally significant in terms of carrying out contract killings and so on, who've been exploited by the Indian government here. So to me, it was interesting because it points at something we've all seen in plain view, but not really talked about at all.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's go grab a coffee. Who's starting
I'm all ready.
this week?
Double shots. So according to David Eby, on Thursday night, when the Surrey Board of Trade was having a debate, John Rustad didn't show up because he was at Gotham Steakhouse in Vancouver having a dinner with who? Eby's claim is that probably with fundraisers, people who could contribute money to the campaign. But I think we should know who it is because
I thought he was at a rally in Oak Bay.
Well, Eby says he was at Gotham Steakhouse, but if
the Conservatives are putting out photos of an Oak Bay rally that night, comparing it to the Surrey Board of Trade event.
Okay, well, I'm not in a position to check all that stuff, but there's people who have, in my view, made every effort to drive out Kevin Falcon and throw the election to John Rustad. And we need to know who they are, what they're looking for, and what they're expecting to get out of these interventions, because it has had a dramatic impact on the campaign to see Kevin Falcon driven out. And he made a correct prediction that there would be a ton of noise around the Conservative candidates because most of them were not ready for office at all. So if he wasn't at Gotham Steakhouse, that's interesting. But I think there have been those kinds of conversations occurring. And it'd be very interesting to know who it was who convinced Kevin Falcon on that fateful weekend to finally cave in BC United. And it would be very interesting to know if there were meetings in the last week or so at Gotham Steakhouse or elsewhere, where those people came back together and said, John, we wish you were doing better given the efforts we've made to put you where you are today.
Well, I suspect the people that convinced Kevin Falcon were Shachi Kurl, Mario Canseco, and Kyle Braid, and the other pollsters.
I'm sure there's more to it.
Their fault.
Yes.
Well, their fault.
Yeah, I'm sure there's more to it.
There's stories there, not just poll reading.
Oh, there are stories,
yes,
I'm sure.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
We'll talk about NDP backrooms tomorrow.
Okay.
I've got a double shot of double shots. So first of all, this is a nerdy point, but there was a very amusing to me LinkedIn dispute between Yuri Fulmer and Jeremy, insert last name, Kate.
Yuri Fulmer. Valorette. Jeremy Valorette. Yeah.
About Valorette put out like, look, this poll's really good for me in West Van See the Sky. And Yuri Fulmer says, that's not the right poll. This is the right poll, which has him leading. Neither are polls because what they're looking at is projections. They're looking at projections of many pollsters are extrapolating the broader regional trends and using history, extrapolating it to a riding. I'm just raising this point because I think a lot of listeners might be concerned or not concerned, confused when they see some of these projections like Main Street or 338 or others will put out these riding by riding projections. I see lots of candidates using them as proof points that they're winning. They're not polls. They're just a forecast based on probably historical data and applying current general polling trends to it. So just be careful, folks. Be careful what you're watching because it's not the same thing.
Yeah.
So that's
poll versus projection.
Poll versus projection. Thank you.
And then we do like the more you know, like the pollster edition, pollster nerd edition, right?
But I'm gonna do my second double shot coffee, whatever. To the future parliamentary budget officer of British Columbia, who I know we're going to appoint after the next election because no one is paying any attention to fiscal policy in British Columbia. And I know that we are just all going to work together to appoint a parliamentary budget officer who can actually shine a light
and that's different job than the Auditor General, by the way, who's going to shine a light on the impact of building children's hospitals in Surrey and and new patient towers in Langley, which the NDP promised last weekend, blah, 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 right? We're heading into these huge deficits. And boy, I'll tell you, if the politicians don't care about it, we should find somebody who does.
Yeah. Okay, I'll keep it tight because I want to build on that. I guess it's double shots. I wanted to just do a lament for economic policy. I'm going to maybe I'll try and offer a latte to the Conservatives and hope that their costed platform will bring us back to some of this discussion. I mean, there's a lot about economic policy we haven't touched on in this election, but for starters, let's unpack the size of the deficit and then like what we're spending on and what we're not spending on. Like we need a robust discussion about this. And I'm just, you're on stage, Conservatives, like help us get us back there. It's your space. I'm ready for it. We're all ready for it. All right. This is another great episode of Hotel Pacifico. Thanks for joining us, guests, for episode 15 of our daily election podcast. Thanks to our presenting sponsor, TELUS, and our sponsors, Fortis BC, Airbnb, and BC Dairy. We will see you Wednesday, guests. BC, you can never leave.
Checkout time at Hotel Pacifico. We hope you enjoyed your stay.